G'day everyone, we are counting down my top 20 songs of all time. We're into the top 10 now, and number 10 is another Australian band. Might surprise a few people though, given my penchant for harder edged rock music, but this band was certainly one of my favourites back in the 80s. I saw them that many times live, probably 20 to 30 or thereabouts. The band is Boom Crash Opera, and the song is Hands Up in the Air. This was their second single, followed up on Great Wall, came out in 1986. And I've always thought that this song should have been one of the biggest selling singles in Australian music history. I was dumbfounded that it wasn't bigger on the charts than it was. It did okay, incidentally. I think it made it to the top 20, but I actually heard this track first up live, one of the many shows I saw them do. And I remember vividly the first time they played it, and the audience just went nuts. And it has that anthemic chorus, which is so typical of them. They had a lot of those chanting type vocals, but particularly so in this track. It's just got a big, big chorus. And as the name suggests, it does make you want to put your hands up in the air. Boom Crash Opera were a band that to me always smacked of Melbourne. They had a real Melbourne feel about them. Maybe that's why it wasn't bigger on a national scale. They got bigger than this though. Their second album, These Here Are Crazy Times in 1989, did pretty well. Songs like Dancing in the Storm, you still hear that a lot today, played as backing to sporting clips and whatnot. It, in some ways, actually seem to have got more popular now than when they were around during the 1980s. But this song is, for me, clearly their best. It had commercial hit written all over it. I guess it's probably a good thing I'm not a radio programmer. But they had a great mix, Boom Crash Opera, of guitars, drums, and keyboards. And, I got put off keyboards by the wash that sort of saturated so many tracks in the 1980s, but this wasn't one of them. It got the balance quite right. And live, particularly, they still had a rock feel and a pop sensibility. The vocals were a big part of this band too. Dale Ryder, great frontman and lead vocalist, but the backing vocals as well by Pete Farnham, the lead guitarist, who had initially been in Serious Young Insects, another of my favourite bands back in the day, and bass player Richard Pleasance, really good bass player. You had Pete Maslin on drums and Greg O'Connor on keyboards. And they were a fantastic band live. I saw them a lot live before I heard any of their recorded stuff. And their recorded stuff followed it up well. Their first album, self-titled, was produced in England by Alex Sadkin. I always felt the production was a little bit thin and didn't quite capture the essence of the band, didn't embrace the guitars and the drums enough, and I think they got that right with their second album. Unfortunately, this track was on the first album, but this track, I think, does get the balance right and sounds well produced. And it just hits the right notes consistently throughout the course of the song. I think it's an absolute ripper. I still reckon if it was released today afresh and people hadn't heard it before, it would do good business. It's a great song. It's an uplifting song, and it's got a great sing-along chorus. I still play it frequently, and every time I play it, it still makes me feel good for having sat through it. So definitely one of my top 10 tracks of all time. Not one people might expect, but definitely up there for me. The band Boom Crash Opera out of Melbourne, Australia. The song Hands Up in the Air. That is number 10 on my top 20 songs of all time. I'll be back soon for number 9.